Dennis Snow, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here.
Now, how did you get started with Disney?
Well, I was 19 years old, and I was on a break from college, and my plan was to hitchhike from Vermont to California and live in the mountains for a semester. And my father said, that's not such a good idea. He said, you really loved Disney World when we visited there when you were a kid. Why don't you try and get a job down there? So I hopped in my beat up Delta 88 and put stop leak in the radiator so I could make it down to Florida. And I got a job at Disney World, driving the submarines at an attraction back in those days called 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I was Captain Nemo, and it was fantastic. I worked in Fantasyland, and it was just going to be a 3-month job. That was the plan, and turned into a 20-year career. And if you ask any of the Disney management about their background, it will be almost the same story. It was just going to be on a break from school, fell in love with it, and ended up staying. So I was there for 20 years.
Wow. What was the first day like?
The first day, you go through what's called Disney traditions, and they talk about the history of the company, where it all came from, Walt Disney stories, which were mesmerizing, what's expected of you as a cast member. They call their employees their cast members because you're part of a show. So they're really instilling that Disney tradition, that Disney culture during that first day before you ever go out and meet a guest, a customer. And everybody goes through it. And it doesn't matter if you're hired in management or a frontline position, everybody goes through this. And so by the end of that Disney traditions, you feel like, okay, I know what this place is all about. I know what they're trying to accomplish. Then you go out for the on-the-job training. And what they're doing then is teaching you how to take all of those service principles and apply them to that specific job. So it's a very seamless experience from that first day. Usually when you join an organization, that first day is you sign here, here's what you get fired for, and I've always thought it was always exciting on your first day of work to read about accidental death and dismemberment, Well, they talk about the history and the traditions. And so for me, that was 1979, and I remember it like it was yesterday.
Wow. What were some of the Walt Disney stories that they share with you right up front?
Well, you think about Disney, and you think about it's successful, but certain things that I didn't know when they came up with the idea for the movie Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. This was in the early 1930s. Nobody had ever done a full-length feature cartoon before. And Walt had to kind of convince not only investors, but his own animators that, yes, a full-length feature cartoon will be successful. And everybody was against it. And to get it made, he had to take out a second mortgage on his house, just because of money issues and so forth. So I didn't know that. I didn't know that he had to cash in his life insurance to get Disneyland designed back in the early 1950s. Nobody knew what a theme park was. It was always carnivals and everything before that. So what happened was, with these stories and you learn about what Walt and the team went through, you had this 19-year-old kid who thought this was going to be a summer job, just a 3-month job. That's what I came in with. And now I had this legacy on my shoulders. And one of the things that I think every employee in every organization should carry a legacy on their shoulders, that they know that when they have this interaction with a customer, that legacy is on the line. So that was a very powerful time.
And what's the sort of the next step? Like if you're doing like sort of a Disney development process, right, as a person, as a leader, what are those next steps that they do? So
depending on the person, obviously, because not everybody wants to move up in the organization and not everybody is right to move up in the organization. So they're really careful about what they do. But it's a huge organization and you have to let people know what you want to do. So the first real promotion is to what back then was called a lead. It's kind of like a foreman. You're still a hourly cast member, but you're responsible for an attraction while you're there. So that's kind of the first promotion is into that role. And then next move up would be to a supervisor. And my favorite thing is that, the greatest title I've ever had was I was the supervisor of Fantasyland. Not many people can say that. And then manager and so forth. But what I found was working in theme park management, which I loved. What I found is I really loved the development part, developing people. And the great thing about Disney, and I think one of the great things about great organizations, is you get the opportunity to do things you love. So I went to the Disney University, which is the internal training arm of the company. So when you went through that Disney Traditions, that new hire, that's who put that on, was the Disney University. They do the management training. So I did that, and then I managed that for several years. And then we spun off a division that's called the Disney Institute, where companies would come down to benchmark best practices. And we had a division that would do customized training programs for specific organizations. And so the last few years with the company, I managed that operation and also did a lot of the training too, which is still my first love. That's what I love doing. And then I went out on my own and started my own company from there. So I had 20 years in with Disney, and now I've been doing this for 20 years.
What are the things? What are some of the things that are most attractive when you talk to other companies, like that they say, "Oh, we want this to happen"?
Yeah, the big thing is the consistency of the customer experience. The one thing and one of the things that Disney is known for is, regardless of which of the parks you go to or which of the hotels you stay at, it's got a Disney feel to it. You always know that you're in a Disney place. And so one of the things that a lot of my clients, they want is, how do you create that consistency where everybody on our team will understand what's expected? Another thing that they always comment on is that the place is so clean. How do you get people to do those things? So it's not necessarily that they're looking for suggestions on how to keep our company clean, but how do you get your people to do the things that we want them to do that create that experience? And then from a management perspective, what people are really looking for is, how do you embed that in the culture? How do you embed those? How do you hire people in that are wired to do that? How do you train? How do you hold people accountable for it? But it all goes back to even people who aren't Disney fans kind of understand that Disney is known for the experience that they create. Not everybody's a Disney fan, but even if they're not, they know that, okay, they've kind of figured out how to create that consistent experience. So that's what they want to hear about.
So, you're saying you're called cast members if you work for Disney. Can you kind of take us behind the scenes of that, and maybe some things that people don't know that they probably would like to know about Disney?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's some things I can't share. We can talk about that later. But it's an operation. And if you go behind the scenes, that's one of the things that typically would surprise somebody, is they deal with the same issues every company deals with. The cast member, the employee. I hate the shift that I have to work. I can't believe I have to work on a holiday. I can't stand my supervisor. Whatever it may be, they deal with the exact same issues. Everybody wants to get paid more. All of those things. When you go backstage, you see those things. The weirdest thing is, I have seen Cinderella smoking a cigarette, which is the weirdest thing. But all of that happens backstage. And when I talk about Cinderella smoking, imagine you come to Disney World and you're out on stage, you're a guest, and you see Cinderella smoking a cigarette. Your child runs up and sees her smoke. There'd probably be years of therapy involved, but all of those things happen behind the scenes. So the learning is that even with those issues, the business issues that every company deals with, there's a customer experience you're trying to create, and everybody has to be crystal clear on what that experience is, and it must be non-negotiable. That you do not smoke, eat, drink on stage, those kinds of things. But yeah, going backstage can be a little bit of an eye opener.
Yeah. So one thing, so I was listening. Do you ever listen to radio classics on like XM radio or whatever?
Love it.
Yeah. So I heard a bit, and this was from like the 40s, where it was supposedly the good humor man, like they used to sell the ice cream bars, and so they would negotiate about which good humor man got to play which song, and so they'd start off the new guys on the most annoying song, the song that everyone hated, and then it got up to like the best one. Internally, are there like this is the ride you want to work on because it has the best music, or this is the one where it's the worst one, or what?
Yes. So the two things. The one that they kind of look for, that really outgoing personality. Have you ever been on the Jungle Cruise?
Yes.
Yeah. So they're known for their humor and those kinds of things. So that's kind of a select group. That's where they're assigned there. The hardest one, and I had to work at this one, was after I worked at 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. They sent me to work at It's a Small World. And I'm assuming you've been on it, so you know the song.
Yes.
Imagine hearing that song, It's a Small World, 8 hours a day. And so it was brutal. It was brutal. And when my youngest son, David, when he went many years later, obviously, when he went to work at Disney, his first assignment was It's a Small World, and I just had this big smile on my face. Yeah, but the Jungle Cruise was kind of the one where the really outgoing people, that's where they went. And I don't know if It's a Small World was a punishment for something I did or what, but yeah, that was tough.
Well, and this is another one. And if you can't share, you don't know, we can have Eric edit it out here. But a guy who worked here, his little sister, used to be a Disney princess. Mm-hmm. So is there a hierarchy of Disney princesses? Like this is your starter princess that you are, and then you work your way up to this one?
Well, when it comes to the princesses, obviously what they're looking for is someone who, when you think about the movie, there's a look, that you're looking for. So the answer to the question is no. It comes down to, is this person the right person to play that role? So there is not a hierarchy of that. Is it the right person to play the role?
Yeah.
So yeah, good question though. That's all I can say.
That's all he can say. That's a different answer than we got. Anyway, but anyway, so on the next part here, what are some different ways that people can kind of infuse, other than consistency? If people are looking at either for their own personal development or for their company, what's one way that they can kind of take Disney home with them, even if they don't have, Cinderella's castle at their business?
Right.
What can they do?
Well, I think a few of the things is, one of them would be that recognizing, regardless of what business you're in, you're selling an experience. The product is just a part of it. And that's one of the things that Disney really stresses, is certainly the rides are important, but everything from parking your car to buying your tickets to checking into the hotel to getting directions, all of those things are a part of the experience. So looking at that overall customer journey that your customers go through, and how can we make each element of that experience an excellent one? And what I always recommend to companies is, that I consult with and speak with, is to look at all of those elements and say, what would a mediocre experience look like, and what would an excellent experience look like? Because mediocre is the enemy of good. Bad service, if we've given somebody a bad experience, we know it. Mediocre means we just sort of process somebody. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't enhancing the brand. So first of all, it's just looking at what makes up the overall experience, and how can we make each component of that as excellent as it can be. Another concept is something that is called everything speaks. That every detail, from the appearance of your facilities to the tone of voice of an employee that I'm talking to on the telephone, every detail is either enhancing your brand or it's detracting from the brand. And what you want is every member of the team to be thinking, are the details saying what they're supposed to say? And so the way to make that happen is, so what are the things that could take away from the brand? Physical and attitudinal, whether it's trash on the ground, or it's a tone of voice issue, blaming somebody else in the organization for a problem in front of a customer, identifying those things, And then identifying, so what are our commitments then that we need to be committed to make sure that those things don't happen? Because again, everything speaks. And then the third thing is, how can we create little moments of wow throughout the experience for our customers? And it doesn't have to be big things. It's just those little, that genuine smile. One of the things when we were loading people on the attractions, there's thousands of people coming at you, and you only have seconds with them. And so we would just, we'd make eye contact, we'd smile, we'd comment on something that they might have on their T-shirt. I used to look at the Mickey Mouse ears that the kids would get with their name stitched on the back. And, I'd say, hey, Bobby, how are you? And it just freaks the kid out because, how did he know who I was? But the parents think you're wonderful. And it took a second. So, those are the three real things. What really makes up the experience, and how can we make each part of that excellent? If everything speaks, what are those details then that we need to focus in on? And just how can we create those little moments of wow? And it doesn't matter what business you're in, those three things apply.
One of my favorite stories of yours that you shared last time that you were here about creating those little moments of wow in a sort of it's Disney, but it's like in a circumstance could be anywhere else, is in the parking lot afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
With the keys.
Yeah. So, one of the things that it's not so easy to happen anymore with the keyless entry cars, but, if you've ever locked your keys in your car, it's an embarrassing situation. And so, people would realize out at Disney, I've locked my keys in the car. And so this is not a happy moment when you realize that, the kids are going, oh, Dad again. And so by coming together and talking about this as a team, and all the departments would do this, what can we do to solve those kinds of issues? They came up with, it's a department called Key Control, where you lock your keys in the car and you go up to one of the cast members working out there. I've locked my keys in the car, and they'll call Key Control. And just a few minutes later, this van will show up, and don't ask me where do they hire these folks from, because I don't know. I'd love to see the recruiting strategy for this job. But, they're in your car in about 5 seconds, and they're handing the keys back to you. And it's that moment of wow. It's that moment of wow. Keeping track of the different locations of the parking lot that they park cars, so that if somebody forgets where they parked, all they need to do is say, well, I came in about 10:30. Oh, you're parked in Goofy 21, and there's your car. It was a moment of wow. And so that's a great differentiator, by the way, in organizations, is to identify what are those things that can really frustrate a customer, and to do something about it, to come up with processes, of how to deal with those issues.
Now, we're not the first place that you've come back to multiple times. Mm-hmm. What are some of the places or some examples you might have of success stories from companies who've had you in the past? Like they said, hey, Dennis, we had you, you said this, we applied it. Mm-hmm. Do you have any of those success stories you can share?
There's a few companies that I just walk into later on, and I'm just so happy to see the things that they've done. Where the first time I was there, everything was sort of in disarray, and you come back in and everything is really nicely organized. But some of the things that really stand out to me with organizations that I go back to is when you look at the journey of the customer and how they have thought through each step of the way, especially the handoffs that occur. Whether it's on the phone, whatever it may be, when there's a handoff from one function to another, when they've sat down and thought, how do we ease this for our customer? How do we make this a seamless experience for the customer? That's a very gratifying experience. I worked with a truck stop operation one time. And you think about a truck stop, that's a tough business to operate in. And they really engaged their people in the training initially, but then the management was very, very good about just constant follow-up. And when I went back and you saw the place again was immaculate, all the employees were friendly with everybody. It's one of those things that you step back and you think, okay, it worked. Now, I'm not naive to think it happens every time, all right? But the success stories do feel pretty good.
Well, one of the ones, just for a testimonial from us, like we're doing this. The studio here is in the IT section of our company here, and one of the things that we create is an online proposal. So we're talking to a client on the phone, and you had talked about really making sure that we focused on these little moments of wow.
Right.
So it's really hard to do like Cinderella's castle, but you can do these, oh, wow.
Yeah.
And if you repeat those enough times, you're successful. So one of the things we do is we send out this online proposal, but it's actually getting clients on the phone and then showing them some of the things that it does. Like they'll say, oh, it's actually, I said October 15th, it's actually October 22nd. And I would say, okay, click refresh. And we've already updated and say, oh, wow. And then we'll have, oh, can you add on this? Oh, wow. Of course, we're adding Dennis Snow every time. But just all these little, wows. And so we got much more intentional about trying to show off the little neat things that we have. And in turn saying, hey, when you turn around and send this proposal to your people, you'll say it, and I'll say, oh, I got this from Denise. Wow, she got this to us quickly. And then we're getting her a wow. And so it kind of like trying to grandfather that in, that what you taught us.
But you think about, any business, you think about a restaurant and the numbers of points of contact that happen in that restaurant experience. It doesn't have to be the big grandiose things. But if each step along the way, somebody's just giving you that little added wow, little wows add up, and you can't always put your finger on exactly what they all were, but something special happened.
Now, one last question here. So, you were talking about you thought your initial journey was going to be hitchhiking from Vermont to the West Coast, and but you had this detour through Disney, which could be, that's your life story, is detour through Disney.
That's right.
But
that's my next book.
There we go. I get my little commission off that. But going back to your family, did your family, from once you went through all that Disney process and everything else, did they ever go, Dennis, you changed for the better because of this?
My parents, they loved the fact that I worked at Disney. Okay. Keep in mind, I was 19 years old when I came. My parents lived in New Hampshire at this point. And they loved that. They just thought that was the greatest thing. Not because they saw this big change in me, but they could tell their friends that they knew somebody who could get them into Disney for free. Okay, so that was the big thing from my parents' side of
characters,
it.
Connections.
Right, that's right. So I became the Disney connection for my family. My wife.
That's right. You had an arranged marriage.
Yeah. We basically, it was a Disney marriage. She actually worked at Disney longer than I did, so we were very compatible. Right off the bat. Both of my sons have worked out at Disney at some point in their lives. So it is truly, so I can't say they saw this big change, because it's just been part of my life since I was 19 years old. I've been surrounded by it since I was 9, which sounds like brainwashing now that I think about it, but it really isn't. I learned so many valuable things that I apply every day. Not just in my business, but in my personal life. How Disney teaches you to look through the lens of the guest and understand, they've spent thousands of dollars on this trip. They're confused, they're overwhelmed by this. And you can apply that thought process, not to just your business, but to you're having an interaction with a child. So it's impacted every aspect of my life.
Great. Well, Dennis, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.